Anait B, and as I said, I'm a graphic and web designer. I also do web development, and I've been in the industry for roughly 10 years, maybe a little bit more. This V here, that's basically my name that my clients know me for, which is Velvet Made. And I've worked with a lot of different clients from different industries and on different projects, from logo and branding to presentations, full website design, and so on. And just a little bit of my background. I actually have a background in architecture, and I have a master's degree there, but I started with graphic design actually during my studies. And then I just kind of kept it going after graduating. So I'm from a little bit from this creative background, let's say. I also have interest in photography, so I'm on the visual side. I've always been so. Okay, so we will start with how it looks like as a profession and what you can actually design for clients. Usually when you say graphic design, most people think that the thing that you are doing are logos and logos only, but it's much more than that. I started with print, and basically print and digital, I would say, are two main categories of design. This is something that I started with, and when it comes to print, you can basically do everything from flyers, brochures, catalogs, business cards, posters, and so on. For example, backdrops that you can see on conferences and so on, banners that you see outside, wall graphics, and product labels as well. So basically anything that you can print into some kind of physical form. Generally, the same rules apply to print and digital design, but print has a little bit more, let's say it has certain specific requirements that you have to respect, such as, for example, colors that printers use, that you have to kind of adjust the design to have certain spacing rules and so on. So it has a little bit more, I would say, additional requirements that you have to respect when it comes to print. But generally, it's the same. Like basically, you are just respecting the rules of design, whatever it is that you are designing. And here are just some examples so that you can see what you can design. For example, I did a card for an educational company, or some kind of three-fold brochures, bifold brochures, catalogs, and so on, and magazines, and basically anything that's printed. And then you have digital, which is, of course, today very, I would say that print is still high in demand. People are still printing everything from ads and flyers and so on. But of course, digital is growing more and more, I would say. And when it comes to it, you can design infographics, data visualizations, and digital illustrations, graphics. Also, one thing that maybe doesn't occur to people, it's actually PowerPoint presentations, which are very high in demand, which I noticed after transitioning from print. That's also a big niche, let's say. Then you can design reports for companies that can also, of course, be printed, email, newsletters, which are also very high in demand. And then, of course, social media, because today everybody's going on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and so on. So you can design also thumbnails for YouTube, for example, Amazon listings, ebooks. You have a big, wide range of things that you can design. Whatever it is, my suggestion is always to pick a niche and then be an expert in that niche. It can be also that you are focusing on one specific industry or one type of companies. It can be that you're focusing only, let's say, on PowerPoint presentations, or even if you're just doing YouTube thumbnails, that can also be. And then you really position yourself as an expert in that specific niche, let's say. Here are just some examples of PowerPoint presentations that you can do, that I've done for some clients. And you can see basically it can have different looks depending on what they want. Actually, those are quite high in demand when it comes to PowerPoint presentations, because today a lot of people are doing so-called investor decks, where they're asking for funding or some kind of company overviews and company profiles and so on. So actually, this is a big niche. Maybe you don't think that people would pay for PowerPoint presentations, but it is a very high in demand. Right now, it makes maybe 70% of my workload to do PowerPoint and Google Slides, for example. especially for bigger companies and for bigger corporations. These are some data visualizations and infographics that I've done. And also you have in the bottom, in the middle, you have a graphic for LinkedIn that was actually a LinkedIn ad. So all these kind of graphics that you can do, for example, representations of certain stories and so on, that you can visualize and depict in a more graphical way. And then when it comes to sectors, basically you can do, I would say that there is a big difference between designing for startups and enterprises. So if you design for startups, which actually I think I can talk now actually, and then we can go back. So usually when you design for startups, which is very popular these days, because we do have a lot of these companies that are growing and they have big requirements for design. Usually they want to position themselves, at least at the beginning, as a little bit more friendly, more approachable. So that also commands certain type of design. For example, colors that won't be so strict and so maybe not as dark like they would usually use, a little bit more, maybe brighter colors and so on. The style can be more playful. You can use more illustrations, more icons, maybe the fonts also that you use would be different. And it usually gives you a little bit more creative freedom in this sense, that you have a lot of space to experiment with style, especially because those are the companies that still haven't grown and still haven't fully developed. So they have a lot of space so that you can actually work with them on building their visual style. And as I said, you can use probably more illustrations and icons than for already established companies. And on the other hand, you have companies and corporations, especially enterprises and so on, that have usually a little bit more serious and professional look. They're a little bit more, let's say, sober and less playful. So because usually they already have an established look that you have to follow. They have guidelines like branding guidelines and so on that you kind of have to fit into. So you don't have that much of a creative freedom. I worked with both, and I like working with I like working with startups in the sense that it gives you some space to build the look for them. With the corporations, usually, as I said, it's that you are following the style. However, I actually like working with corporations, and I often do work and prefer actually to work with companies, a little bit bigger companies, just because of the communication that I found to be very usually without any issues, without any problems. They usually respect the time that you put in. If they see that you put more time into something, they are usually very responsive if you say that you need, for example, to be compensated for it and so on. So in terms of communication, I would say that maybe it's not the most creative way to design, but it's rewarding in this sense that usually your time is respected and you don't have to kind of explain that you didn't spend, 16 hours as you planned, but you spent 40 and so on, and you won't get basically trashed for it. So in terms of communication, I actually like to work with these kind of companies. And just to go back to sectors, so you can work basically every niche, every industry basically needs some kind of graphic design. So you can work with business, with finance, with food and beverages, especially for labels, because those are the sectors that do need a lot of, for example, packagings and so on. Packaging and logos are two things that I don't necessarily, I'm not that proficient in, so I do other types of design. But of course, as I said, like most people think that graphic designers do only logos, which is far from truth. Then you can work with the tech sector, especially today. A lot of my clients are from technology because, as you know, everything is kind of emerging, especially artificial intelligence as well, AI. So you have a lot of requirements for techs. And each of these industries, like educational, real estate, each of these industries has their own kind of specifics. For example, colors that you use for tech, or colors that you use for real estate, or usually how dynamic a certain design is, and so on. So each of these industries has their own specific requirements, let's say. But as I said, it's always important to pick yours, something that fits into your style, or something that fits into your also way of communicating, and so on. Okay, maybe we can now just go quickly what's in demand. So I've already mentioned that from my point of view, this is of course like based on my experience. Its presentations are very high in demand, which I didn't expect. I didn't even know that this is something that the clients pay for. It is mostly, as I said, pitch decks and, for example, investor decks when companies are asking for funding or when they're pitching a project or pitching an idea or pitching themselves and so on. Then you have internal decks that they use, for example, for company trainings. They can use them simply as company overviews or company profiles and so on. As product presentations if they are, for example, launching a new product. But this is a very profitable niche as well. There are companies and design agencies that do only this. Basically, they just focus on presentations and that's all they do. So this is one of the, and I would also say that it's very accessible. So most of the people, they have either PowerPoint, they worked with PowerPoint, and they also have Google Slides, of course. So these two formats are very accessible. You can start learning it today. You don't need like to spend 1 year learning how to do in Photoshop or to get a subscription that are usually a little bit higher price these days. So this is one of the things that I recommend actually to start with if you're planning to do something with design. Then we have social media graphics, as I said, because everybody's on social media and you have a lot of social media ads, which are extremely high in demand. For Instagram, then, as I said, also YouTube thumbnails, LinkedIn banners, or also backgrounds. I've designed backgrounds, for example, for clients that they can use for LinkedIn, or, for example, Zoom backgrounds. People also design Zoom backgrounds and so on. Ebooks that are also quite popular. And then, of course, we have web design, app design, and especially UI and UX, which is basically user interface and user experience design. So if you're not familiar with the term, if you take an app or you browse a website, it's all this, when you think about, for example, the journey of a user who is opening an app. So it's not just the design, but also like the logic behind it, like how many clicks you should, for example, where the button should be positioned and so on. So it's a little bit more of this technical, let's say, not just design part of apps and websites. So all of these, I would say they're all very high in demand these days. Maybe print not as much as I said, but it's still there. I still do print work every now and then. Then I'm not sure if anybody has any questions right now, or maybe we can continue. Okay. Okay, so basically, I just wanted to show you quickly how a typical day looks like. I'm a freelancer, so that might be, of course, it would differ if I was working for an agency. But as a freelancer, basically I split my day into several different, let's say, activities. So one big part of it is, of course, replying emails to my clients. And then you have pitching for new projects every now and then, because you do kind of have to find your own projects. Usually clients come back to me or they find me. But especially at the beginning, when you're starting out, you do have to send proposals to projects. And I still do this on maybe like once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Then I do, if I have a new project, then I spend some time sketching, and I still use, let me just check that. I still use the paper, pen and paper. That's my always to go to. I don't use some digital ones. People use it. It depends on you. But I always start with just simple pen and paper. And it doesn't have to be some, as I said, I'm not doing logos. If I was doing logos, probably I would sketch much more. But I work mostly with layout, which is like the organization of elements on the page or on the slide and so on. So for these, I do very basic sketches, and you don't really need to know how to draw or how to illustrate and so on. Then a big part of my day are updates and feedback rounds from clients from current projects that I have. And this usually takes the most time actually in the project. So you can start, you can send the concept or the sketch to the client, but then by the end of the day, you will spend the most time on feedback loops. It rarely happens that you send them the draft and they're happy with it and then it's done. It happens, but very, very rarely. And usually it's around, from my own experience, 3 to 5 feedback rounds. So they come back, they tell you what to fix, and you send them back and so on. So from my experience, it's around 3 to 5. I personally don't charge for feedback for a certain amount of a certain number of feedback rounds, but a lot of designers do this. So when they send a price to the customer, especially to avoid these kind of things that you spend 90% of the time on feedback, they say that, for example, 3 rounds of feedback are included, and if you want more, then you have to kind of pay more. I don't do this, but it is a very common practice for designers to set a certain rule how many feedback rounds you can have. And then you have, of course, the communication with the current clients. So you send them the feedback, you send them the updates, they send you back the feedback, and so on. And then I also, this is the part that's, for me, it's important to prevent the burnout, which is to work on my own projects. They're usually related to graphic design or to design or some kind of creative field. So every now and then I, for example, found a topic that I'm interested in, and then maybe I would try to do some kind of visualizations on this, or to illustrate something, or to build something of my own. And that kind of helps me to prevent that I'm not just focused on what clients want to see or what clients want me to design and so on. And one more thing that I didn't put here, which is actually every now and then, every maybe 2-3 weeks, I go to some of the platforms for designers, and then I just kind of browse and see what's trending, let's say, or if I feel like I'm losing some inspiration, I just go there just to see and just to look at some proper and high quality design, just to kind of train your eye as well and so on. So this is what I do also on a regular basis, just kind of like to push myself a little bit to stay in the game. Now I think that a big difference and the advantage of this is of graphic design is also that it's although it depends on the current trends, and those trends are changing. So the things that are popular now or that clients want to see now, they were different, let's say 10 years ago or 5 years ago or even 1 year ago. But it's not, I would say, that high, as in, like, there are certain rules that are more or less the same rules apply like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, or when people were designing printed books and so on. The same design rules apply today as well. So in this sense, I prefer this kind of like more eternal design than to focus on something that's popular today, and then maybe in 6 months it will be something completely different. So I wouldn't necessarily say to always follow the trends. I would say to stick maybe to something that's more permanent in this sense, and not just to run after what's popular or what you're seeing on Instagram or on all of these platforms. Now, a little bit about client work and how a project looks like from the beginning to an end. So usually it starts with, there are, let's say, different projects, but usually clients directly message me with a project, or I send a pitch that gets approved. Now, of course, you do need a lot of skills to get your pitch approved and for your proposal to get approved. You need to really know how to write properly a page so that you don't lose clients' interest. You send the message across. You also, of course, have to know how to deal with the quote and how to make them actually accept the quote and so on, and not just go for the cheapest solution. So this, I would say, is a skill of its own, not necessarily the one that I've mastered like many designers, but most of my projects come from directly clients coming to me and asking me to do work for them. And then after this, you start discussing the project. So first you need some information from the client, like the scope of the project. For example, if it's a website design, so how many pages, what would be the requirements if you would have some, for example, forms on the website, and if it's a, let's say, brochure, so how many pages again in the brochure, if you would provide the images and so on. So you need to determine the scope. Then, of course, what they need, if they have any preferences on the design, and what are their terms, which is very important to ask for deadline, because very often they wouldn't tell you that they have a deadline in like 3 days or 4 days or 1 week, and then 1 day before the deadline they would try to push you to deliver it. So it's very important to set the terms up front. And of course, your quote would also differ. So if you have a rush project that's meant to be done in, let's say, 48 hours or 72 hours, then you are, of course, entitled to ask for a higher price. And the deliverables as well. Some designers, a lot of designers, they're not really willing to provide the source files for their projects. Sometimes if the client says that they do want the source files, then you can also, again, charge more. And one thing also that that can increase the price of your project is, and to ask at the beginning, is if you can use that piece in your portfolio, which is very important, because the clients find you and they contact you because of your portfolio. And if you are not able to use it, that project, then it cuts actually a lot of your own, let's say, marketing. So that's one thing always to ask at the beginning, because sometimes they would say that they do need a non-disclosure agreement and that you cannot use it. In those cases, I almost always, like many designers, for that private project option, let's say, you can ask for compensation, of course, for higher quote. So all these questions there, it's very important to ask them before actually agreeing to proceed with the project. If it's more or less, if it's a small project or if it's more or less clear, then of course you don't, but it's good to be as precise as possible from the beginning. And then you have to get, of course, assets from the client. So first things to get are the content or the draft. For example, if you're doing a presentation, usually they would send you the presentation that just has the content, like the text or maybe the images, but just placed on each slide. Or it can be also, for example, Word document with the text content that you work with. So some kind of content, some kind of draft. Then they also have to, in most cases, they already have some branding assets. So they would send you their logos, they would send you the colors that they're using and the fonts. Those three things are usually the essential part of their branding. And you are supposed to follow that branding unless they say otherwise, or they don't have any branding and you're completely free to do whatever you want. Usually this is another thing to ask before starting. And the last thing that I always ask, which took me some time to realize, but it's very important because it can save you a lot of time. I always ask them if they have some sample files or inspiration, some files that they like or they don't like. It can also be useful if they send you something and say, we don't like this because of this. So usually they go to Google or they go to some of these designer platforms or Pinterest, and then they find, for example, a logo that they like or a specific style that they like. And it can be really useful because in a lot of cases, they would tell you that they don't have any preference or they like anything, or they know what they like, but then when you send them something that you would see that they have actually very specific taste, and this can actually save you a lot of time. So from certain point, I started doing this all the time, that I always ask them for sample files, and it really helps a lot. You're not kind of stealing anything, but you just want to kind of get into their mindset and what kind of style preference they have. Then you start sketching and working on the concept. I usually tell clients that they can have it from 3 to 5 working days. Some designers, of course, it depends on how much projects you have, but I always manage to somehow do it in 3 to 5 days. That's what works for me. Some designers will say that they're able to start working in 2-3 weeks, so it's completely individual. I personally like to start working on the project as soon as possible so that I don't lose the ideas. And then after this, once they approve the concept, then you can start working on feedback rounds and updates and edits and all the revisions based on their comments. And during this process, you use mockups. So mockups are basically, you don't necessarily have to use them, but I realized that you have much better feedback from clients if you're using mockups, and it gives them much better idea. Mockups are basically, if you're designing a brochure, or a flyer, instead of sending them a simple PDF, you would kind of try to make that flyer look like a 3D flyer. So it looks real, let's say, as if you printed it, and then that's basically a mock-up. Or if you're designing a banner on a wall, then you would actually put your design on an image on the wall using Photoshop or something else, and it would look like it actually is 3D, that you printed the design and so on. So these are very useful, and clients really appreciate it and they like it. And usually, as I said, you have better feedback on your design if you're using a mockup. After this, you have final delivery, and then usually they release funds. When it comes to payment, some designers like to set upfront payment or 50% upfront, or you can have like 100% payment also upfront or upon final delivery. The platforms that I work on, usually how it works is that the payment is secured until you deliver the files, or however you agree with the client, but it's secure, so you know that you will get paid if you do the work. But at the same time, it's protecting the client as well. So the fund release is upon the delivery of the final files. This is just to show you how it looks like. When on the left side is what I got from the client. So this is one of the samples of those drafts that I was talking about. So they can, for example, give you something like this, which basically contains the text, information, in this case, images as well. And they usually provide, in those cases, some kind of Photoshop files, in this case, or some kind of source files, and then you can work on it and to redesign it and so on. Actually, a lot of cases, you don't design from scratch. In a lot of cases, it's basically a redesign that you are doing, either of these drafts or only in cases, for example, if they give you a document in Word and you're supposed to make some kind of visual representation of it. But very often, as I said, it's a redesign that you are doing. This is a sample of how actually communication with the client looks like. I don't know if you can see it properly. Let me see. I have seen the chat. Okay, I'm just checking the questions here. Okay, maybe I can answer later. Okay, I will just continue with this then. Okay, do you hear me now? This is Abdullah.
For you.
Hello? Hello? Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm my first contributions as a member of AIU entrepreneur. I'm very happy to contribute to this course. And I would like to know, I am a chief of enterprise. Sometimes I make some design in a paper to print it. And here, and as a chief of enterprise, my products are against mosquitoes, and I am selling it, in a big surface, in a big shop here in Dakar. And people, I get advice from a designer here in Senegal, and they tell me that I have to remake a beautiful design for my product. The question that I would like to answer is that if the designer in the product can contribute for purchasing well the product, or what is the better features of a designer for purchasing, the product as mosquitoes, as spray, as product against malaria.
I didn't hear that. I lost you. Can you maybe type a message and about your question? Because I don't, or you can try to repeat, but I hear you very badly.
Are you hearing me?
Now, yes, but it keeps the connection keep cutting, breaking.
Okay. So I'm asking, if a good designer can participate to the product, sell well product as a space that because I'm a system enterprise here. I'm a learner. I came from the University of Chicago, but at this time I'm working about as an enterprise. I am a scientist. The question that I would like to know is if a good designer on a paper can participate to the good functioning in the training, in the commercial way, something like that.
I'm really sorry, but it keeps breaking. Could you please just send me the question in the chat and I will reply?
By writing?
Yes, if you can write me, because it keeps like cutting every other word. Sorry.
Okay.
Mhm.
I will do it.
Okay, you can send it and then I will get back to it and I will reply. Mhm. Okay. Mhm. Okay. Mhm. Okay, then I will continue for now and then we will come back to the question. Okay. Okay, so basically, yes, so I just wanted to show you how actually a message from a client can look like. This is I hope that you're seeing it, but basically they just tell you what they need. So they say, I need a leave behind folder with 5 inserts for my technicians to leave with homeowners. And they attach the brief and the files that they need. They attach the brand guide for their company. And then also they attach the sample from their competitors. They said what they don't like. They said we don't like the look of their materials, but we are looking to copy the format. And so basically that's how it looks like. This is actually the message from them. And then after this, I replied that you usually have some templates, let's say, that you reply. So I usually start, some designers don't use even hi, like they just go directly into it. I like to always say hello, and if I know their name, I say thank you for reaching out and that I'm interested and if I'm available. And then I say that I reviewed their brief and guidelines. I give them the quote and what it includes. So for example, here I wrote that it includes the revisions, the designer's fee, and preparing the file for print, and the source files in that case, and so on. Then I usually give them some kind of reference, what my quoting is based on. And then also when they can expect the draft. So I say they can expect it within 3 working days upon officially starting the project, and so on. So this is basically how it looks like. After this, they accepted the quote and we proceeded with the project. So it's fairly simple. Okay, this is just a very briefly like what are the basic principles in design, since we are not, okay, I will go back to this. We won't go into depth here. Of course, this would be a completely separate probably course. But basically, you have some principles that apply to any type of design from print to digital. So we can do the basic principles are contrast, that you should always have contrast in your design to kind of guide your eye, and to then hierarchy, which is of different elements. It can be, for example, sizes of text, that not everything should be the same size. You need to have certain hierarchy in this. Dynamics, which can be, for example, using diagonals and so on. Also different types of fonts, rhythm, balance, proportion, pattern, or repetitions. And this doesn't necessarily mean repetition, literally, like repetition of element, like repetition of square, but it also means that, for example, if you're using certain font size, you don't want to use, you want to use it as much as possible. for elements that are more or less the same. So you repeat not just the shapes, for example, but you repeat, let's say, the spacing between elements, and because your eye gets used to it, and then it's much easier for you to digest it, to the design that you are seeing, and you kind of fixate it already, and then you don't have to get used to every new font size or every new color and so on. So simplifying actually and making it easy and digestible for the viewer is very important, and grouping of elements and so on. So these are all basics that apply to anything that you are designing. Then we have softwares. Just a very brief overview. So we have Photoshop, and most people think that designers only use Photoshop, which is not true. And first thing is that you shouldn't design logos in Photoshop. That's the first thing to learn when you're starting with design. Photoshop is used mostly for photo editing. So if you're editing some photos or making some photo collages or doing post-productions on images and so on. So it works with images, raster images, and it shouldn't really be used for anything, not anything else, but that should be a Photoshop. Photoshop is for this, for photo editing, and mainly this. It does allow you a lot of things to do, and you can do really magic with it, but not designing for print, not designing logos, not designing websites, and so on. Illustrator, which works with vector graphics, and you can design different illustrations there, infographics and data visualizations you do in Illustrator, icons, including some custom icons for websites and so on. And it can also be used, I use it a lot for business cards and for flyers. So those kind of smaller print graphics or one-page graphics and so on. And then you can also use it for banners or large-scale graphics, because Illustrator works with vector, and vector is, let's say, type of graphics that you can enlarge, but without losing quality. So, for example, if you're making a banner that's 5 meters wide and it's some kind of, let's say, graphical illustration, you can use Illustrator for this. For labels as well, you can use it, and so on, but mostly for illustrations. So that's why it's called Illustrator. Then InDesign is for working with text documents, and mainly multi-page documents, so especially books, catalogs, and brochures, and then all kinds of print documents, for example, banners, flyers, business cards, and so on. You can use InDesign, but mainly, as I said, multi-page documents and print. And books as well. So this is InDesign, and then we have Microsoft Office. So as I mentioned already, presentations. So we have PowerPoint. PowerPoint, and we have also, as I already mentioned, like pitch decks and investor decks, which are very high in demand, and then some kind of company profiles, internal presentations, and so on. Then we have Word, which is usually a nightmare for designers, because clients love it because they usually have Word on their devices, so they can edit the documents. And but for designers, I think it's one of the worst things, because it's really limiting. I work with Word very often, but that's not the type of project that I'm looking forward to. So of course, as you know, like you use it for text documents, so mostly some kind of reports, especially like 50-page reports and so on. Then we have Excel that you can also use for text, charts, tables, data, and so on. And again, clients like it because they usually have it on their devices again. And it's also very limited when it comes to design, but you do it for clients. Then where you can find work, and which platforms do you use to find work? Basically, the one that I started on, and that I definitely recommend because it's very focused on designers. Of course, all of these are very competitive, so it's not that you just sign up there and get your first project. It's a lot of work involved. But one that I started on is 99 Designs, and it is really focused on designers. A lot of these platforms are for freelancers in general, so you will find designers, coders, copywriters, even photographers, and so on. 99 Designs is really for designers, for graphic and web designers. And how it works is, and how a lot of these platforms work, are based on contests. And I will say something about it in a few slides. And you also have one-to-one projects, but it is quite competitive. I'm not sure right now if they have an application process. When I was starting, there was no application process. Right now, maybe there is some, but it's still possible to like sign up and try to get your first client there. Then you have Upwork, of course, which is, as far as I know, doesn't have this concept of contests. So at least you start building your portfolio there by sending proposals and pitches. But it is, of course, very competitive, maybe even more than, I would say, 99 Designs, because it's focused not only on designers, but they have everything there. And then they have also very wide range of, for example, hourly rates and so on. So often you're competing with someone who doesn't have the same hourly rates as you do. And in a lot of cases, clients would end up hiring them. But on the other hand, they also do have a wide range of clients. So you would often find, for example, some enterprise clients that are looking for work there and so on. So I would say it's a little bit more competitive because it's more diverse in terms of this range. Twine is another platform that is based on pitching for projects. I haven't had that many projects there, but I've got several clients that I really kept for years. So it was very also good platform, I think, for designers. And I believe they're not focused only on designers, but a big part of it are. And actually a lot of pitch design projects you can find on Twine. And then you have also Design Crowd, which is a little bit also based on contests and one-to-one projects. And I think it's a little bit maybe easier because it's not, I think, that competitive, or for beginners as well. It's, I think, more accessible because you're not really competing with that high level or designers that have been in the industry for like 10 years and so on. And how do you build a portfolio, basically, if you don't have any client? So a great design contests are basically, as I said, you have them on 99 Designs, for example. So how they work is that the client comes up with a brief. So for example, they say, like in this case, we need a visualization of products that are considered before a purchase. And then they give you the brief, they give you the document that explains what they need or how it works. And then you're supposed to come up with a design. This can be anything. It can be, for example, a brochure. They can make a contest for a logo. They can make a contest for a website design and so on. So they come up with a brief, and then designers are basically participating in the contest. You can see or they can also pay extra to the platform to have it as a blind contest, which means that you cannot see the entries of other designers. So you're kind of protecting your work. And then you can send them your proposal. You usually have around 3 to 4 days for the open round. And just in case that they can also rate the design during this phase, and they can give you feedback. So they say they want you to change something. After the first round, you go to the final round, and if you win, then you get the prize for that contest. So in most cases, unless it's some special types of contests, you don't get paid unless you win. But it's a good way to build a portfolio, because you can use this later in your portfolio unless the project is private, as I already talked about it, because the clients can also pay more to have this private project option, so you cannot use it. But if you can, then it's a very good way to build your portfolio, to learn something. You're also competing with others, so it's a great learning curve. And you gain a lot of experience, of course, because you're actually communicating with a real client, and they're telling you like what they like, what they don't like, what you should fix. So it's a good real life experience. And as I said, this is how I built, for example, the portfolio before winning my first contest. And you can also do a lot of fictional projects. For example, this is one that I did because this was not done for a client. It's a real project. I really built a website and an Instagram page and everything for this vitamin base. And it was just something that I came up with. Basically, it was not done for a client, but it was done on my own initiative. So it's a good always, if you don't have any projects in your portfolio, or that to pick something that you're interested in and just create some project on it. It can be, for example, as I said, an Instagram account or some kind of graphics. In my case, it was a full website. And this can really build some pieces in your portfolio. And it's always good to have, I think, at least 5 items. It's better to have 5 nice ones than to have 30 items in your portfolio that are so-so. So I would always like focus more on building like 3 to 5 really good ones that you can show. And it's nice to use mockups, as I already said. It's always good to use mockups in the portfolio. You also have the design competitions that that are not based on this contest, but for example, you can just go. You have some links here. Like design, graphic competitions, and design boom. And every now and then, every day, basically every week, they are listing new competitions. And for example, this one was done for a Czech company. I didn't end up winning this one, but it was good to build a portfolio. So it was a cover page of their magazine. So this is also how you can, Contest Watchers is another website where you can check this. And it's good like to sometimes maybe posters. They often have competitions for posters and for product design as well. It's usually tough competition there. Again, not touch, but very tough competition. I have a typo, but it's a good way as well to build a portfolio this way if you don't have any clients yet. These are some portfolio platforms that are basically aiming at designers, Behance and Dribbble. And this is actually where I often go to just see what's happening in design. Basically, you can go and browse. People are posting their designs there. I like both of these, and it's good like to just browse and just kind of see and train your eye a little bit. And this is just one example of a graphic design agency that I really like. I always go there every now and then again to see, because they have very inspiring designs, and it really kind of they're also great for learning, to go there and analyze their designs, and you can learn a lot from them. So this is one of my favorite agencies that I turn to when I lack inspiration. And this is one channel that you can follow on YouTube that's really good for learning. And they say they focus on design of business and business of design. So they kind of talk about both aspects, not just the graphic and web design, but also about business of it and how to build a business out of it. They have great tips when it comes to learning really about design principles and analyzing the design and becoming better in design. And they are exactly, as I was mentioning, I think they focus a lot on this kind of permanent aspects of design. So not just what's trendy today, but they really teach you a lot of things about how things work in design, but how they were working 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and how they work today still. So they have this kind of, let's say, eternal approach to design. It's a very good source of information to learn if you're starting with design. They have a bunch of videos on YouTube, so you can check them. And how do you land the client? Of course, it's probable that you would need to lower the price at the beginning, because the most important part is to get a review, to get the first project, and after this it really starts rolling. But review is the best reference that you can have and the best way to get the second project. So once you get like the first, second, third project, or 1 to 3 reviews, then it really becomes much easier. I would suggest always to avoid overcrowded projects if you're starting. So if you see that there are like 50 people pitching for a project or 100 designs in the project, I would maybe, in the contest, then maybe I would step away. And it's good to target a specific niche that maybe not that many people are interested in. And when you're sending a proposal, I realize that it's much better to send 1 or 2 projects from your portfolio that are a good and relevant reference to what the client is needs, and then to send 5 or 10 samples if that's not that relevant. So it's always good to pick the project that's as relevant as possible to what the client needs. For example, I recently, maybe 6 months ago, I started working with a client I was building an e-shop for him, e-commerce shop, and it was for an online courses platform, online teaching platform. And I luckily had the very similar project that I worked on last year, which was also a platform for online courses. And it was enough just to send this one project, and it was very close to what they needed. And that's how I got this client. So it's always better to pick one or two projects that are relevant than than to send like a whole bunch of stuff that the clients won't even take a look at. And then how do you charge for services? I usually charge per project, and I think that's because you're not just working hourly, you are providing certain value for the client. For example, if you're building a website, you're not just charging for maybe 1 month that you will spend on the website, but it's something that stays for them, that can really build their business and help grow their business. It can help them grow their revenue and so on. If you are also if you're creating a logo or a branding package, you're not just spending like 3 or 4 hours or 10 hours on a logo, but it's something, maybe if it's an enterprise, for example, their logo will go on top of their building, or it will go in their corporate reports and so on. So it's really a representation of that company. So you always have to think about the value that you are providing to them, not just the time that you spent. And when it comes to print, for example, it depends if they're printing it like 200 copies or 5,000 or 10,000 copies and so on. Of course, you have to think if you are providing a service to let's say a local painter who is trying to print a flyer to promote their paintings, or you're providing a service to a corporation that has like 1,000 employees and so on. So, but in general, it's always good to think about that value that you're providing and to charge for that value, not for your time. When it comes, so as I said, like if the design itself will help them grow their business, bring them more clients, more income, and it's a big part of their, let's say, identity, then it means that you can set higher fees. And when it comes to hourly fees, I usually use it for some updates that are easy to calculate. For example, I know that this will take me two hours, and it's more or less automatic work or manual tasks, so they don't require much creativity or much designing and so on. So if it's more or less technical work, as I said, updates on the website, or for example, the client recently, they wanted to reformat the report that we did. So to change the format from A4 to US letter, for example, or something similar. So this is something that's already been done. So we already designed the whole thing. I just need to change the format. For these kind of updates and revisions, I usually charge hourly. And one thing that I really like about design is that you really get to work with different companies and to see actually what people are doing. Like you can really your clients can really be people from niches that you didn't even know they existed. So you can really learn about a lot of different stuff, a lot of how things work. And for example, you can work with an AI company, or you can work with some company that's in the legal sector and so on. And you have to actually learn a little bit about this in order to design for them. And I think that's the nice thing about it. You get in touch with all these things that then, provide you a lot of inspiration and thinking like what's possible and what you could do also and so on. So you get in touch, I think, with a lot of different industries, with a lot of different spheres. And I think that's what I really like about it. And also that it enables you to then work on a lot of different stuff without relying or hiring someone. For example, if you learn how to design a website and build a website, and if you want to make a blog, for example, on books that you're reading, you can do it by yourself. So I think it's always good to have some kind of basic knowledge. And this is just for the end, just some phrases that I got from clients. I heard all of them, and this is probably one of the most popular ones that you always hear all the time, because they usually just tell you if you can make the logo bigger. And usually this just means that they want to show the logo, how much they paid for it, and they really like it, and they want to show it to everybody, even though it's perfectly sized, and you know exactly why you made it that size and why you placed it on that part of the slide. They will usually just want it bigger all the time. And this is another phrase that they will say, I don't know what I want, but I will know when I see it. So this also is why as I said, why I like to ask them for inspiration and for samples before, because usually they say something like this at the beginning, and then you know exactly that they do know what they want, but they are just either too lazy to explain and to articulate it, or they just want you to spend some time first, and then they will show you what they like once they see you are not on the same track. This is another thing, of course, why it's good to set these requirements at the beginning, and to kind of know exactly what format they need it in, and to ask this at the beginning, because very often they would think, they would be excited for starting the project without sharing the requirements with you, and then they would go to the printer and they will say that the A4 format that you used, they cannot print, so you need to redesign everything in US letter. So it's always good to, and it's not necessarily from a bad place, maybe they just don't know that these things take time to reformat. They think it's maybe one click, but it's not. But it's always good to talk about this upfront and to have all the requirements set at the beginning. And when they say they will discuss the design with their team, usually that means that it will be like 10 or 15 people involved, and 10 or 15 different opinions means that probably you will need a lot of revisions. So when this comes, like, rarely it ends up with we are good to go and it's approved. Usually it means just like prepare for edits. Or when they say that that it looks great, but we only have a few minor edits, it usually means they will start from scratch. And this is, of course, their favorite one, when they say that there will be plenty of work coming, which usually means just give us a better price, because we will give you a lot of work, but usually you don't want to work more, you want to work less. But this is what they try to kind of do to lower the price. And this is one actually thing that I got from a client. They gave me literally a 24-hour, or I think it was 36 maybe, hour deadline, and it was a 50-page Word document. And of course, I needed to do an all-nighter in order to meet the deadline. But then at 2 a.m. they were asking me what was I doing awake, although I think it was quite obvious. And of course, all the clients want design yesterday. And very often they won't have the content, but they want you to start working on it. And if you get, it's not quite there yet, just don't fall into despair. And of course, you always have to make it pop. So, but again, on the other hand, this is another thing that I got from the client, which always kind of makes your day. It makes you also a little bit sad that they would say this about themselves, but they said that I made them look more professional than they actually were. So it was nice that it made some kind of a difference in at least their clients' eyes, and that the design kind of provided some value to them, and that they were happy with it. So on the other hand, you can also hear some nice things like this that kind of, as I said, brighten your day a little bit. So that's it. I think that's all I had prepared. So now we can, yeah, I can see the questions. I'm not sure if I can just reply to this. I have 2 questions here.
Yes, and we have 5 minutes left. We can answer the questions in the chat.
Okay.
If any of you have a question as well, you can use the hand reaction.
Okay, so I have this question. I'd like to know if the design and paper can participate to purchase a product, again, mosquito or insect, because I'm a chief on enterprise. I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm not sure I understand the question. Can I ask for okay, I see some, just a second. Can I ask for the host if you can clarify maybe this question? I believe that you can see it from
who is the question?
From Sis Abdullah. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing.
No, I don't understand the question either.
Okay. Then I have a question from Lombani. Banda, if you can provide us with software for graphic design, from graphic designers. Those are I think you will get the presentation, I believe, the PowerPoint after. So I listed some softwares before. Let me just go through it here. So basically, like, I think it depends what you want to do. So if you are, for example, planning to do a software free or needed to pay. These the Adobe ones, they are paid, and you have to pay a subscription. Now, for example, I'm not sure, I know that a lot of people already have PowerPoint on their computers. What I would suggest if you are trying to start is using some free ones. For example, if you want to start with just basics, let's say, just to kind of train yourself a little bit in design, just to try, I would start with, for example, PowerPoint, or if you don't have PowerPoint, then slides, because slides are, of course, for free, and you can just play around, for example, with colors. You can explore some fonts, you can play a little bit with layout or learn some things here. So you don't necessarily need, Photoshop to edit a photo to learn design, or you don't need to start illustrating to learn the design. Of course, depends what you want to do. If you want to do logos, then yes, I would suggest getting Illustrator license. But if you just want to kind of experiment at the beginning with design and just to see, how colors work together, how you can work with layout, then I would maybe just literally go to slides, put some text there, and then experiment with sizes, experiment with colors, try some different fonts, and try putting some images there, making not necessarily even a presentation, just to work with elements of design, just to kind of get into it. But I don't use the free ones. I know there are a lot of free alternatives. I will be happy to send some links after, or I would do a research as well. It's not a problem. And then I can put this in the PowerPoint, and then you can also have access to it. But if you're planning to do some kind of industry standards, then you would need these softwares. I would, do I offer personal tutorials? You can connect with me anytime. I think you would have probably you would have some contact. How good design can participate well to the purchasing of products? For flyers, I think for sure, like the same that happens, for example, I think design in general can really make you buy or not buy a product. So I definitely think that a flyer is a good way to advertise. I mean, people maybe don't think about it, but I still see a lot of ads, from flyers to banners and posters outside. And a lot of times I end up, going to that concert or buying the product and so on. So I think definitely that print design still is, and print advertising is still working. And I think it's the same like with the website. Like if you have a sales page, if you have a good sales page, it will make you click that button and buy it. So I definitely think that good design can really make you buy a product, but you need to highlight properly everything that needs to be highlighted. You need to make it in such a way that it's easy to digest, that it's not like full page of text, for example, but that when you take that flyer into your hand, you see first, that button, let's say, that will make you buy it, or that message, that you want to see, or the price and so on. So you need to really make it easy to digest and to have that information, the first one to see when you take that flyer into your hand. Okay. Well, I'm happy you like the presentation. And our emails, tutorials, and good software is free or paid. Yes, I will share with the host. We sell products again. Mosquito, what information we have to deploy? But I would say, I mean, if you are selling, let's say, a product against, I guess, against that you wanted to write, maybe against mosquitoes. So you want it to be very obvious. So you clearly want to, first of all, use an image of a, mosquito and some kind of, not a mosquito dying, but that it's not a presentation about mosquitoes, but it's a product against mosquitoes. So you need a good image, clearly, and that will kind of, you would see it like straight away that it's what it is about. You don't have to read the whole flyer. Then the second thing would be some kind of, let's say, big bold headline that says, what this is about or what the product is about. You want to highlight some features, maybe, like bullet points and so on. So you want to break the information down as much as possible. Maybe you want to use some icons, instead of just writing a full page of text. And then, of course, like what people always want to know is where to buy it and what's the price. So that information is also very important. But, and then probably to highlight, what is the benefit for them. So for example, how quickly you can get rid of mosquitoes, or how, how strong it is, or some benefit, for example, that it's not harmful and so on. So you want to highlight as many things as possible, I guess, and to use a good picture and to break the information down. So I think in this sense, I think design can really help you.
We can answer a question from Asfa Hapte, and we'll make this the last question for today. So let's see what they have to say.
Should I, let me, let me just ask to unmute. I'm not sure that it's, I don't know why. Can you unmute him? Because I'm trying to unmute, but I'm not able to.
Asfa, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. Hello. Hello. Now we can hear you.
Yes. Good evening. How are you? Hello. My question is, can you hear me? Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Now I can hear you. It's breaking a bit, but I think we can hear you.
Okay. Just handling projects. My question is about handling projects.
Yes.
And my question is, at what % of well-handled project is edited after client's feedback?
Sorry, once again, what percentage is?
At what % a well-handled project is edited after client's feedback?
You mean if I have 100 projects, how many of them are edited and how many of them are done after the first round, you mean?
Now, only for a specific project, if the project is after done, or the content is already, the concept is developed from the graphic designer, then the client brings his or her their feedbacks to the designer.
Yes.
So if the project is well handled or it's a good project, what % should be edited?
But I'm not sure what you mean when you say that the project is 100.
From what I understand,
100% is only for one specific project.
Sorry, Antonella, you were saying?
Well, from what I understood, if the project is 100% done, what percentage can be edited after the client gives you their feedback, I think is what he's trying to ask.
You mean edited in terms of edited in the software? Like further edited, you mean, or?
You have about just developing the concept of one specific project.
Yes.
After that, your clients give a feedback to you.
Yes, exactly.
Then that feedback be edited because of you are working the need of the need of that client.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. If the project is well handled or a project, what percent of it should include from that feedback?
Uh, if I understand,
Does
what usually,
any percentage?
I would say that for that usually it's, from my experience, it's around, if I understand correctly, around, let's say, 30% from my experience, 30%, like 20 to 30%. But it depends. Sometimes, for example, if you, of course, if we go above that, or I mean, I don't have a fixed amount, but if we go above that, then I usually tell clients that we are exceeding the amount of feedbacks. Like, it's not about the number of feedback rounds that as I said, I don't include a certain amount of feedback rounds. But if I see that it's taking, for example, the same amount of time that I spent on concept, then we are kind of exceeding it. But I would say around 30 is, for at least for my standards, 30 is still okay. But of
All
course,
right.
some designers will tell you maybe 10, 15 or 20. Some include unlimited revisions, like they say it like this to the client, and which also I think it's maybe not the best idea to articulate it in that way, to tell them you can ask for anything you want, because usually then they will ask, But I think around this, maybe for me, around 20 to 30 is okay, 20% or 30%.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Anait.
Okay.
Thank you everyone for being here today. Remember that we have a class at the same hour